Hello, team, and welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is the Ukraine War Frontline update for the 25th of May, 2023. Change! I can't accept change. Don't do it, says the normal human brain. Look, War Mapper's mapping colours appear to have changed a little bit. How do you feel? I feel a little bit uncomfortable. No, I don't really. It's a map. It's got colours. Although I did prefer the brighter yellow. But nonetheless, here we have the War Mapper map. It seems to have changed, but I like the fact it now has Russia and Belarus, Poland, and these places around. These aren't just grey areas without any kind of indication of what's going on there. So that's good. Right, we're going to go to the northeast sector, to the Kupiansk, to Kreminna, to Svatova front line, although the names aren't on this particular map. I don't know whether this is indeed how he's going to do it, or whether this was to do with the attack or into Russia. On my map, that looks like this. So we have Kupiansk up here, Svatova, and then Kreminna further down south. That's the northeast axis. And to be fair, not a great amount of news along the entire front line. I'm going to start today by saying, by quoting Andrew Perpetua here, who normally does live streams and a lot of mapping. He says, unless something really exciting happens tomorrow, I will not do a stream. There's just so little news right now. Likely a combination of bad weather, partial media blackout, and the culmination of the Russian offensive. I'd agree with all of those claims. Right. There is talk, this is no reports talking about little changing on the front. Kharkiv, I'm still waiting for clarity around Mazietivka. It's unclear whether or not it is in Russian hands. So this is interesting because we have had the claim that Russian deep reconnaissance groups and so on and so forth had taken control, if you like, of this area. I say, if you like, there's only a couple of buildings in Mazietivka. It's interesting that no reports has Liman Pershi under the grey zone indication, and I have indeed taken my Mazietivka Russian control back in line with kind of what not Andrew Perpetua, no reports is saying. They're just unsure what's going on. Maybe contradictory claims coming out of that area from both sides. In fact, Poulet-Volant's map has, as you can see, the Russian line being pulled further back now and not including Mazietivka. Bit of intricacy here involving the river, the Oskil River, with the Ukrainian line there. But yeah, so a little bit different there. Liman Pershi still in Russian control there, but possibly not for no reports. It's in grey zone there. So I still have that under Russian control. And Mazietivka, who knows what's going on there, but it's not exactly huge military activity, it has to be said. And then as we come further down south, well, we go to the ISW. Ukrainian General Staff reporting that Russian forces conducted unsuccessful offensive actions near Mazietivka, Bilohorivka, and that's obviously south of Kreminna there, and that they have conducted a ground attack near Mazietivka. Russian forces claimed that assault detachments conducted a ground attack there. Geolocated footage posted on May the 24th, and you know I'm going to check this, indicates that Russian forces captured Yahidna, which is 22 kilometers east of Kupiansk, prior to May the 24th, and that Russian forces additionally made marginal advances near Spirna. Okay, let's check that Yahidna claim, which is here. So this was new Ukrainian 88th Brigade destroys surveillance system Muron P with a loitering munition. That's in Yahidna, and we have that as the geolocation. We're going to plug that in and see where that ends up. That is behind Russian lines, so I don't think that is anything significant for me. Now, this was a place where the Ukrainians, quite a long time ago, were claimed to potentially captured it. Then I think it swapped hands and went back to being Russian. And so what ISW is saying here is yeah, confirming what we already knew, but actually quite a long time ago. So yeah, as we come out of there and go further down south past Kreminna, there really isn't a lot of activity going on this axis. Everything seems to be rather quiet. There is activity near Bilohorivka, possibly in the Kremna forest. There's talk about Akhmat being active there. Those are the Chechen sort of special forces. We come down to Spirina. So that claim from ISW refers to an FPV drone hit of the K2 battalion destroying Russian troops near the village of Spirina. So does this show that they have advanced marginally in the area? Let's geolocate that and see where that ends up. Quite possibly, actually. So we have a Russian advance in the area of Spirna. The Ukrainians did have control over that installation there, which has some tunnels underneath it. Well, that's been in Russian hands now for a couple of weeks, and it seems that the Russians may have made some small advances there. So I might reflect that on my map a little bit later today. Okay, so as we come past Spirna, we come to this Bilorivka, which is just south of the other Bilorivka. This one is on the way towards Bakhmut. And Andrew Perpetua in his mapping video the other night, so I think about 36 hours ago, talked about how the Russians lost 5 vehicles around this area. Quite a big loss. There have been some high losses for Russian equipment over the last week or so. And this is one of the areas where they made an attack, and that was foiled, and they lost a good deal of equipment. And as we then come on to Bakhmut, not a great amount of detail coming out of Bakhmut, but we'll go through what has been said. First of all, let's go to the ISW and talk about the loss stats that have been doing the rounds in the socials. I talked about it in my news video this morning, and this is particularly Prigozhin making claims of 20,000 Wagner deaths in and around Bakhmut. So the ISW, Institute for the Study of War, American military think tank, says discussions regarding reported Russian losses in Bakhmut have saturated the pro-war information space and are drowning out any remaining positive informational effect resulting from the city's capture. Wagner Group financier Prigozhin claimed during an interview with Russian political strategist Dolgov on May the 23rd that Wagner lost 10,000 convict recruits and 10,000 full-time professional Wagner fighters killed in action over the course of the battle for Bakhmut. Prigozhin specifically noted that Wagner had recruited 50,000 prisoners, 20% of whom died, so that's 10,000 died in fighting for Bakhmut. Russian mill bloggers immediately seized on the reported losses, thereby shifting the overall Russian conversation away from discussions of the significance of the capture of Bakhmut and towards amplifying speculation surrounding the reported losses. The nationalist pro-war faction, exemplified by the views of former Russian officer Igor Girkin, commented on the massive scale of the reported losses and speculated that real losses may be much higher. The Russian politician Viktor Alksnis simply remarked that the Soviet army lost far fewer soldiers, 15,051, in 9 years in Afghanistan. Gherkin stated that he believes that Wagner's actual losses could be more than 1.5 times higher than Prigozhin's claims, and pointed out that of the 50,000 recruits Wagner received from prisons, 10,000 died in action and 26,000 reportedly received pardons and returned to Russia, leaving 14,000 prison recruits unaccounted for. Gherkin suggested that a large portion of those 14,000 unaccounted for prison recruits may have also been killed in action, and claimed that Wagner has likely suffered more than 40,000 killed in action. Gherkin suggested that Prigozhin keep his mouth shut and stop talking about wild losses for a very insignificant result. Another Russian mill blogger, by contrast, praised Prigozhin for being open about the scale of losses and stated that the Russian Ministry of Defense would have hidden such figures. What do the pro-Russian voices on my threads say about this? I know you're in the payment of the Kremlin, so you can't say what the reality actually is. But here you have several Russians commenting. In fact, the leader of the forces of those who are fighting in and around Bakhmut, commenting on how many losses were made. Another Russian who has contacts on the ground and has a pretty good grasp of what's going on, saying that the losses could be 1.5 times higher. Either way, these are phenomenal losses in Bakhmut. Now, the Ukrainians will have lost a lot as well, but the idea, like the claim of the Ukrainians, in fact, not even the claim, like them just being there is evidence that the ratio was in favor of the Ukrainians, because if it wasn't, they would have pulled out, right? They're not in the business of just throwing bodies to their death for no good reason, right? That is just utterly counterproductive for the Ukrainians. So the fact that they were defending is itself prima facie evidence that the death ratio was in to the benefit of the Ukrainians. Now, Russians have lost arguably, I would say easily around 50,000 casualties in the Bakhmut area. That is a huge, staggering number of people, and arguably more. Again, what do those typical names on my threads have to say about that? Right, going on to Bakhmut itself, and we'll I mean, there isn't an awful lot to report. There are sort of marginal gains being made north and south, apparently, according to Ukrainians. In fact, Deep State Map has actually got some change to their mapping today in the Bakhmut area, which is quite surprising, both north and south. So, north, around this EZO3 highway, coming out of the north of Bakhmut and going along there to towards Privilia, we have, in fact, let's get the roads on there. We have some Ukrainian gains eating away at Russian territory just in this northern area outside Orakovo, Vasilivka, and around here indeed, and a little bit further down. So in that sort of area, not huge amounts of territory, but enough to show some gains there for the Ukrainians. Nothing else, it seems, around here. And as we come closer into Bakhmut and in the Kromova area, there have been reports of repelled attacks around there, but no territorial exchanges. And then a little bit of gain for the Ukrainians around this area here. So I think it was just here that I had to change the mapping so that Deep State showed that the Russians had lost territory to the west of Klishchivka. Having said all of that, there isn't too much detail coming out of the Bakhmut area. If we go back to ISW, they say Ukrainian Eastern Grouping of Forces Commander Syrsky noted that Ukrainian troops are continuing defensive operations on the outskirts of Bakhmut, and still we are hearing claims that the Ukrainians are operational on the outskirts, very outskirts of Bakhmut. Just must be holding on tenuously to the last buildings there. Andrew Perpetua in his live stream saying he's had phone conversations or had access to phone conversations with people live, in the area, saying, "Yep, we are fighting there." That is, completely confirmed by primary sources. So, whether that's a meaningful kind of defense of Bakhmut city itself, I don't know if that qualifies. A Russian mill blogger claimed that Wagner Group forces completely control Bakhmut and that forces of the DNR, the Donetsk People's Republic, are slowly entering the city to take over clearing operations. So we've already heard that Wagner are pulling out. They are genuinely already pulling out of Bakhmut to be replaced by conventional Russian forces. And that's pretty much that as far as what is going on in the Bakhmut region. Is fairly quiet, but some gains north and south. Sorry, cut myself off there. North and south for the Ukrainians. As we move on in the quickest mapping update I think I've ever done, just because there isn't a great amount of detail coming out, we come on to Adiivka. Remember, sorry, I didn't explain for those people who haven't seen my videos before. The yellow lines are the Deep State map. That's a pro-Ukrainian mapper. The red lines are Syriac maps. That's a pro-Russian mapper. And the blue lines are generally the Ukrainian defensive lines, but they're a bit arbitrary. They just sit behind the Russian lines. And actually, in Bakhmut, my blue lines represent Andrew Perpetua, pro-Ukrainian mappers, Russian lines, but it's only in that particular area, in this particular area, until you get down to around Kupiansk-Kreminna, and then it switches back to a defensive line. Anyway, that's just to explain. In Adiivka, we have the ISW saying Ukrainian military administration head reported that Russian forces conducted a massive artillery strike on Adiivka and launched 2 airstrikes with unguided aerial bombs at the city on the morning of May the 24th, yesterday morning. Russian sources, including the Russian MOD, claim that Russian forces struck 2 Ukrainian fuel depots and a command post south of Adiivka during the strikes. There are repelled attacks both north and south of Adiivka, and activity in and around Marinka as well, but there's no great detail. Just to refer you back to, again, Andrew Perpetua, in his video, he talked about an attack by the Russians in the Pervomaisky area. So this is just to the southwest of Adiivka. We have Opitny and Vodyanye, lots of activity over there in these places over the months. But here we had Russian troops attacking, well, both troops and mechanized equipment as well. A bit of everything going on for the Russians around there. And they sort of came up here with their mechanized equipment and dismounted troops as well. Sort of, I forget the exact location, but I think they first sort of pulled around here and then sort of were attacking up here. So somewhere in this general area, this footage and footage like this isn't the only piece of footage was taken, and it appears that the Russians lost a huge amount of equipment, as you can see, dismounted troops, as well as lots of kit. But yeah, he counted around 20 vehicles were taken out in just that attack, that assault, which is a massive loss to the Russian capacity in that area and their capability to mount further attacks. Just really devastating losses for 20 mechanized pieces of mechanized equipment to be taken out in that area at kind of pretty much at once. Just, yeah. And again, it seems to be a case of the Russians beating their head against a brick wall. The definition of insanity is trying the same thing over and over and a bit, expecting different results. Yeah, that's what happened there. But that was the 21st, 22nd time frame, 21st, I think. So that's a good 4 days ago. That's not as if that's happened over the last 24 hours, but just to give you a little bit more detail about the number of losses in that area and what took place. Other than that, though, just usual claims of some of those same places. We've got Novel Konyove to the north and Pervomaisky to the south, and then Adiivka itself, and then on to Marinka. But just to mention that there is fighting there. There's no claims about any changes of territory. In fact, Deep State Map hasn't changed any mapping elsewhere. That Pobjeda disagreement was from Syriac Maps, but they've now taken like a week, 10 days off, so they won't be updating their map. So I don't know whether the Russians have got purchase in Pobjeda or not. And we come down to Donetsk and Zaporizhia, and really not a lot of information concerning activity around there. Russian forces did not conduct any confirmed or claimed ground attacks in the rest of western Donetsk. And really the only other mention the ISW makes is of what's going on in Kherson. So Russian forces continue to target Ukrainian positions in southern Ukraine with FAB 500 aerial bombs. These are the guided bombs that are given extra range with their fins and a bit of guidance, so they're more accurate. And they're also big explosions. There's quite a lot of explosive capacity on these bad boys. So geolocated footage published on May the 24th shows a Russian FAB 500 strike on Kizomys, and not for the first time, by the way. I've shown you evidence of that before. Here is the strike, and that you can see that is not just some small bit of munition. That is quite a sizable explosion there, and that is given at this geolocation. But as I say, this isn't the first time that the Russians have targeted Kizomys with FAB 500 bombs. But just to give you an idea of the exact location of that building that was hit, that is there, just on the entrance, the estuary to the Dnipro River there. And yeah, the ISW continues by saying Ukrainian Southern Operational Command reported on the 23rd that Russian forces attacked Berislav in Kherson Oblast with 4 KAB bombs. Again, not the first time Berislav's been here. A Russian source claimed that Russian forces continued to use KAB bombs on Ukrainian positions near Polohoy, that's in the Zaporizhia Oblast. So Uh, just to let you know where Borislav is, that's the other side of the dam, just by Kherson here. So there's Borislav there. Kokovka, the Novokokovka Dam, and Kherson City just down the river. Borislav, I was listening to Ukraine the latest. Someone saying that they had actually been there as a reporter, and it's a bit deserted at the moment. As in, not a lot of people want to live there because it's getting hammered quite consistently, especially when four FAB bombs is not insignificant. So they are targeting evidently a lot of positions there. Could that indicate that the Ukrainians are accumulating some resources here, ready to push across the river at some point, whether it be across the dam or some kind of amphibious landing across the river? I don't know, but that's certainly what the Russians are hitting there. And as I said in the news video this morning, the Ukrainians are softening up a number of targets in the Zaporizhia and Donetsk oblasts. Mariupol was hit with a significant explosion last night. Don't know exactly what that is. Berdyansk is consistently hit. We have as well. Tokmak has been absolutely hammered by all accounts. Places like here, this is it Blimak or Bilmak? Yeah, Bilmak hit as well, and Polohi itself. So yeah, there's Polohi, and as you saw from the ISW, there were FAB bombs being used against areas north of Polohi, so in the Ukrainian controlled zone. But the Ukrainians are really softening up, ready for an offensive. I mean, surely one of the main thrusts of the offensive will be somewhere along this Zaporizhia line. Anyway, that's the frontline update for today. Really appreciate you being here to listen to me bang on about that. Take care, and I will speak to you soon.